Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and today I want to review the new Star Wars show called Skeleton Crew. And when I first heard about the show, I was not very optimistic because, first of all, some of the recent Star Wars shows were not so good, and secondly, the premise of it reminded me of Star Trek Prodigy, which is a cartoon show about a group of kids who find a starship and take it to explore the galaxy on their own. And so it immediately reminded me of that, even though Prodigy turned out to be not such a bad show, but it's not really that great either. And so I was very pessimistic about the show, and I didn't really like the first episode. It seemed very silly in many ways. For example, everything on this planet that the kids are living on seems almost exactly like Earth of today, except I guess a little bit more advanced technology. Like the kids take their bikes, but they're hovering bikes. Or they take a bus to school, but it's a hovering bus. And their teachers in school are robots, they're droids, and also it had all kinds of undertones of dystopia, which at first I thought was kind of accidental because of bad writing. Like I didn't think it was deliberate. Later on in the show, I'm starting to sense that it's much more planned out than I realized, and so a few things that were shown in the first episode were done deliberately. For example, there was a scene when the father of that kid gives him some lunch money, and it's like little bars of gold plus platinum, or just gold, I guess. It's not Star Trek. But anyway, it seemed kind of silly to me. Oh, so they use actual like small bars of gold as lunch money. So it seemed kind of strange to me. Later on, there is an explanation for that. And I guess some of the dystopian undertones, like the droids ruling the planet apparently, and all kinds of stuff like that, was deliberate maybe. Also, the planet seemed to be totally isolated from the rest of the galaxy. They still think they're in the old Republic, the Republic before the Empire. They don't know anything about the civil war in the galaxy and the Alderaan being destroyed, for example, and stuff like that. So they're cut off from the rest of the galaxy. There's apparently some kind of barrier around their planet, and they cannot even see the stars. There was also a moment that annoyed me when they did eventually get out into space and beyond that barrier, and then they see the stars. They don't know what they are. I guess the barrier prevents them from seeing it from the surface, but wouldn't they still know what they are and how they should look like? So that kind of annoyed me. It reminded me of a scene in season 2 of Silo, which is also a show I'm watching, which, by the way, I really loved the first season. I made a review of it on this channel, and the second season, in my opinion, is way worse. Like, it's moving so slowly, and so little is happening, and it's so boring, so I'm almost about to give up watching it completely. And there was a scene in that show in which apparently people who live in the silo for generations, I guess, they don't know anymore what is out in the universe. They don't know what the stars are. They can't see the stars through that camera that is outside, but they don't know what the stars are. And that just seems kind of silly to me. I mean, even if all knowledge was suppressed, all books were banned and all that kind of stuff, wouldn't people still tell each other all kinds of things like that? I guess after multiple generations, maybe so little of that kind of information remained, since it was so irrelevant to their daily lives, but it seems to me a little bit too far-fetched. And so some scenes in this Star Wars show also seemed a little bit too silly, in my opinion, and I was able to roll with it because there was a certain charm to it. Even in the first episode that I didn't really like, but there was a certain charm to it. There was that kind of atmosphere like, 80s movies about kids going out into the forest to explore and all that kind of stuff. So there were enough enjoyable elements. And so I kept watching, and in episode 2, it all became much more interesting when they basically got lost in space. They hyper jumped into far space and cannot return. They don't know to which star to go to get back home. And they revive one of the droids on the ship, and the droid is behaving and talking like a pirate. It has only one eye, and there's a small animal that lives inside the head of this droid. It can go in and out through its missing eye. And the kids are pretty likable characters as well. Each of them is unique, each of them feels different from the rest, and so it all works together well as a team. And then the droid takes them to a port which turns out to be full of space pirates, and that's when the show really started to get interesting, when it's now a much more dangerous situation, much more exciting, much more tenseful, and some of the pirate characters look interesting. There's the Wolfman guy, which I think we saw someone from his species in that cantina scene in the original Star Wars movie. And there's this Borg-looking guy who I think we saw those kinds of people in the Boba Fett show, I think, and that other alien I think was in The Mandalorian. And of course, one of the kids has that elephant head, which is also a type of alien we saw in Star Wars, I think in Return of the Jedi. We saw an elephant-looking alien playing some drums or something, which, by the way, isn't it kind of strange? How come in Star Wars so many of the aliens look like animals from Earth? I mean, we have the Wolfman, we have the elephant people, we have the owl lady in episode 3, we have Chewbacca who looks like a dog, we have Jabba who looks like a toad, we have the Ewoks who look like teddy bears, and all those kinds of examples which are kind of silly if we think about it. Like, why do so many aliens look like animals from Earth and not actual aliens? So that's a little bit silly, but a lot of things in Star Wars are kind of silly in a fun way. And so the same in this show, I think. We're not supposed to take it all too seriously. I mean, the droid talking like a pirate from Earth is also a little bit silly. Why is he talking exactly like pirates from ancient Earth, which I guess is in the future of Star Wars, since Star Wars is supposed to be set in the past? You know, they never explain the connection with Earth in relation to the Star Wars galaxy. I mean, why do so many people in the Star Wars galaxy are humans and it's all supposed to be in the past? So it was never explained, so I guess we should just roll with it and not think too much about it. And by the way, we also had a scene with a silly looking creature in a cage that looked like a teddy bear with wings, and I think that's a homage to that old silly movie with Michael Jackson called Captain EO, which was a Star Wars kind of movie in which Michael Jackson was flying a starship full of weird looking creatures. One of them was also an elephant looking guy. And then he went to some kind of Death Star, and there was an evil queen there, which, by the way, I think might have inspired the Borg Queen, since that was very similar as well. And he had exactly the same kind of flying creatures as we see in this scene here. So are they now establishing that movie as being part of the Star Wars universe? Like Captain EO, Michael Jackson was using the Force when he was shooting his energy beams into those Borg looking guys and turning them into the good side. So I guess it's all in the same universe of Star Wars. I guess it's possible, why not? If the Force exists and people have magical powers, so why cannot Michael Jackson exist in that kind of universe? And now we see exactly the same creatures in this show also existing. So anyway, the kids keep trying to find their own planet, but each time they mention the name of their planet, which is called Atin, the pirates all laugh at them since they all think it's a myth and it's supposed to be a planet with a lot of treasure. And that immediately connected with that scene I mentioned of the dad giving his kid lunch money that seemed to be actual bars of gold. And so maybe the planet is very rich with such resources, and that's why it remains hidden so that it wouldn't get robbed. And the pirates hear that name and they immediately all get curious. And so it's possible that they actually allow the kids to escape in order to follow them to find their planet. And so I guess we'll find out more things later on about the exact history of that planet and how it got hidden and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of this mystery is what makes the show much more interesting. It immediately became much more fun. And also with all the pirate stuff, it has the sense of kind of like a treasure island story. And what really made the show good was when Jude Law showed up, and he was first introduced as a Jedi, or at least that's what the kids assumed, since he kind of unhoods himself, and I think they did like a deliberate reference to Obi-Wan from the original movie, the way he moved, the way he unhooded himself, the way he talked, and then he used the Force to pull the key to their cell to allow them to escape, which I think it all might have been a setup to simply follow the kids. When later when they escaped that place, the girl even said that it was too easy. You know, that reminded me of how Princess Leia thought it was too easy to escape the Death Star, and later it turned out that the Empire deliberately allowed them to escape in order to follow them, to find the hidden location of the rebel base and all of that. And so there are a lot of little similarities like that in the show, but it also feels fresh at the same time. And Jude Law's character is the most interesting one by far. It kind of reminds me of Captain Lorca from Discovery, which was one of the only redeeming elements about that show in the first season, since he was an actual interesting character and mysterious, and we don't exactly know where his loyalties lie at first and that kind of stuff. And such a complicated character is always much more interesting than just a simplistic one. If he was just a good guy or just a bad guy, it would not be as interesting as someone who is conflicted, someone who is complicated, who is layered, and so it immediately makes it all much more interesting since we don't know what he's going to do next. And there was a scene in the very beginning of the first episode that showed some kind of pirate captain who is in a mask and we don't know who that is, and I guess he will turn out to be the same guy from the beginning. So he is a pirate who pretends to be a Jedi and he becomes part of the team with these kids, and maybe as he gets closer to them he will turn into a good guy in the end, but he's definitely shady and complex, and that's what makes him fun and interesting. And so I was actually pleasantly surprised to be really enjoying the show, except the first episode, which was kind of boring, but maybe later on when I look back at it, it will also be much more interesting because they will reveal many more interesting details later on that will connect to things we saw, and it will explain away all kinds of things that seemed weird in the beginning, like that planet seemed a little bit dystopian in all kinds of ways. Like they said, the kids must take a test. One test will determine their whole life later on, and all kinds of really strict rules and all kinds of strange things, which I guess will be explained later on. And that's why I wanted to make this review, because I ended up really enjoying this show, and hopefully it will keep getting better and better, and I will definitely review more episodes later on. So let me know what you think, and we can discuss it all in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.